No one can keep a secret forever. Jimmy and Shelley Michael are an all-star couple whose glory days were spent on the playing field.
They had a great relationship, the two of them. Shelley was a former cheerleader. Jimmy played football. They were just the all-American crew.
But this jock and his cheerleading bride have something to hide.
Cold, calculating, self-interested, self-absorbed.
Deceit, lies are not the path to having a long and happy life.
What are you gonna do?
And all it takes is one spark.
There's evil in this world, and sometimes people will go to great lengths to commit crimes.
For everything to go up in flames.
As far as I'm concerned, you can both burn in hell.
Just imagine the terror of lying there. It was a horrific way for someone to have to die.
Soon, every dirty little secret will be revealed. It's 2005, and Jimmy and Shelley Michael are a hard-working, all-American couple building a life together in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Morgantown is a big city packed in a small town. It's a town where you know a lot of people.
Their house was in a little neighborhood called Suncrest, which is really one of the old, quaint, and really quiet and peaceful neighborhoods.
Jimmy is a former high school football player who now runs his own medical supply company.
Sure, what do you need? He was a big business leader in this area. People that knew him said he was a good boss and always very giving.
By all accounts, I mean, he was a wonderful young man. I never heard a negative word about him. Nothing but glowing remarks about what type of a character he was.
With his business booming, Jimmy provides his wife, Shelley, with all the finer things in life. And with her good looks, designer clothes, and vivacious personality, the former cheerleader always stands out like a rose among thorns.
She liked to look good and dress well. She was a shopper. I don't think she was bashful about spending money on herself. She had a reputation for being very energetic.
Shelley's proud of her days as a college cheerleader, and she still loves to don her old uniform and make sure she's got the right stuff. Now a nurse at the local hospital, she uses her positive energy to perk up patients and rally coworkers.
Yes, we do. We got spirit. How about you?
She wasn't shy. When she tried, at work, she would break out into like a little cheer just to liven up the room or maybe to just get people to turn their heads.
I think she thrived in that atmosphere because she enjoyed maintaining a positive outlook among those people.
Give me a J. Give me an I. Give me an M-M-Y.
At home, Shelley's as smitten with Jimmy as she was when she first flipped for him 7 years ago. And for Jimmy, the former football player, Shelley's his cheerleader fantasy brought to life.
They were just the all-American crew. They had a great relationship.
Having both suffered through messy divorces, the Michaels seem to finally have the perfect life, with the perfect clothes, the perfect jobs, and the perfect home. But that home is about to become a death trap. On the morning of November 29, 2005, Shelley leaves at 6 a.m. for an early shift at the hospital. It seems like just another typical day.
Nurses Station, this is Shelley.
Until 10:30, when she receives a horrifying phone call that will change her life forever.
What do you mean it's on fire? Where's Jimmy? Where's Jimmy?
There's been a fire. Her house has burned to the ground. Her husband, Jimmy, is dead.
Once the steam and smoke cleared out, we identified that there was a person, in the bed. When a body's exposed to that kind of heat condition, there is a lot of damage. It was a gruesome scene.
I can't think of a worse way to lose somebody that I love than in a fire where they couldn't escape, and to know that their last minutes were just terror.
Shelley is devastated. How could this have happened? As the medical examiner conducts an autopsy looking for clues, investigators wonder if Jimmy was the victim of a tragic accident.
We looked at everything, the outlets, the lamps, the clock radios. We found an iron. All these things had to be collected as evidence and submitted for further testing.
Shelley's worried that maybe the fire is all her fault.
I think I left the iron on that morning in our bedroom.
Yes, the iron was on high, but there was nothing wrong with the iron. All of its safety features were intact, and the lab ruled the iron did not cause the fire. At the end of the day, I had no ignition sources. I had nothing that could create a fire that I could find.
Investigators are unable to determine what ignited the deadly blaze. And what's even more troubling is the fact that Jimmy died in bed.
It was different from other fire fatalities I've had in bedrooms, because a lot of times if a fire victim is awakened in a fire condition, they will try to escape.
It seemed very strange that as a young, healthy man that he hadn't gotten out of the bed, tried to escape the room, tried to open a window.
When the medical examiner is finished with Jimmy's autopsy, he presents investigators with a startling finding. There's a good reason why Jimmy didn't try to escape his burning bedroom. He actually died before the fire started.
The original thought was that he just died in the fire, either from smoke inhalation or actual fire damage.
The initial autopsy found no carbon monoxide in his blood, no soot in his airway, so he was dead prior to the fire.
This is the medical examiner?
Police now have a puzzle to solve. If neither fire nor smoke inhalation killed Jimmy, then how did he die?
I don't think anyone really had any theory other than something had happened to him to cause him to die before the fire.
Could Jimmy have died from natural causes? Or was this some kind of accident?
What was the cause of death?
The medical examiner was able to determine that it wasn't a medical cause, like a heart attack or some disease that had previously been unknown.
Investigators also rule out a suicide or an accidental drug overdose.
Nobody determined that he was on any particular medications. And the toxicology report showed that there were no drugs of common use or common abuse, so those were all negative.
With suicide and natural causes ruled out, it's looking more and more to police as if Jimmy Michael was murdered. But why would anyone want him dead?
There are so many things that motivate people to commit a murder, to have someone to themselves, to eliminate romantic competition, financial gain, those things. You definitely are not covering your bases if you don't at least rule them out.
Did Jimmy Michael have a secret?
Stop calling me here.
And did it get him killed? The answer will shock police and reveal that this couple's happy facade is concealing a terrifying truth. Old enemies and secret vendettas are revealed.
As far as I'm concerned, you can both burn in hell.
When Jimmy Michael is found dead in his bed after a house fire, family, friends, and police are shocked to learn that Jimmy died before the fire started. But how? His death doesn't seem to have been from natural causes, and his autopsy shows no signs of a violent attack.
There was no obvious stab wounds, gunshots, or anything else that, that could be found.
With no clear evidence of how Jimmy was killed, police turn their attention to uncovering who killed him and why. No one can think of any reason someone would want Jimmy Michael dead until police speak to his widow, Shelly. She says there is one person who hated Jimmy and wanted to make his life a living hell. His ex-wife, Stephanie.
She just didn't want to let him go, and she was so jealous that we were so happy together.
She was a scorned ex-wife. She was difficult for Jimmy and Shelly to deal with. She had a tremendous amount of contempt for Shelly. She became an absolute raving bitch about the relationship between Jimmy and Shelly.
Jimmy, there's a word for women like her. Whore.
And made it her mission to do everything in her power to make their lives miserable.
She is dirty trash, slut, whore.
And she would just keep calling him and just harassing him. She was just...
Shelly tells police that Stephanie has continually harassed Jimmy since their divorce.
It's over, Stephanie, it's over, okay?
She believes Stephanie's jealous of their love and looks for ways to ruin their happiness out of spite.
By all accounts, that marriage ended very badly. Stephanie is now looking at this relationship between her ex-husband, Shelly, the former cheerleader, who gets everything she wants, who's living in the house that Stephanie should be living in, who's wearing the clothes Stephanie should be wearing, who's wearing the jewelry, who's living this seemingly picturesque, perfect life. And this could drive someone to act out because of pure rage, jealousy, and feelings of hopelessness.
She's petty and vindictive, and Shelly wouldn't be surprised if the first Mrs. Michael plotted Jimmy's demise.
Got a little warning for you, Jimmy. If you play with fire, you're going to get burned.
If it's not an amicable divorce, there's so many potentials for there to be hurt feelings and animosity and anger and jealousy and rage, and you don't know what the breaking point of a human being is and where they'll do something drastic. Definitely be someone that you would look at and talk to.
Police bring Jimmy's ex in for questioning, and she acknowledges there was friction between her and Jimmy, but she says it's with good cause. She and Jimmy were still married when he started sleeping with Shelly.
She wasn't shy about letting the world know that she believed that Shelly basically stole him from her.
Everybody thinks she's a sweet, innocent little girl. But when you get to know her, she is rotten to the core. She stole him right out from under me.
They appeared to have a pretty good marriage until Shelly came along. Shelley was this attractive woman who didn't think twice about flirting with other people's husbands. And she basically swooped into Stephanie's life and stole her husband.
I'm sick and tired of your crap, and I'm not gonna put up with it anymore. Stay away from my husband. Whore.
Stephanie tells police she and Jimmy both used to work at the hospital, and they'd had a happy marriage. Until that back-flipping bitch, Shelley, started working there too. Stephanie says that even though Shelley was married at the time, she flirted heavily with everyone on the ward, especially her husband, Jimmy. And unfortunately for Stephanie, Jimmy noticed.
She wanted something, she saw it, she went and got it. She believed she was entitled to what she wanted, and in this case, it was Jimmy. To add insult to injury, Shelley did it right in front of Stephanie's face.
Soon after they met, they struck up an intimate relationship. It didn't take long at all for them to chart a new life plan for themselves, and that relationship was off and running.
With Jimmy and Shelley embroiled in a torrid affair, Stephanie's marriage quickly went up in flames. Police wonder, how far was this jilted ex-wife willing to go to get revenge?
It's not as if, Jimmy said, no, I have this wife. I mean, he fell for it hook, line, and sinker. This could only have left Stephanie with a great deal of hatred for Jimmy. This could drive someone to madness.
A woman scorned can be a dangerous thing, but Stephanie swears that any resentment she harbored over her failed marriage is long gone. She's remarried and claims to have an alibi for the morning Jimmy died.
She and her second husband had just had a new baby recently. Her report to police was that she had been at home.
Stephanie tells police that if they want to find out why Jimmy died, they should ask his wife, Shelley. She says Shelley's nothing like the peppy, outgoing cheerleader she appears to be. She's cold and ambitious and rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
On the surface, she could be a bubbly, energetic person, but a lot of people say they really didn't like her once they got to know her a little bit.
Ex-wife Stephanie's alibi doesn't rule her out completely, but if it's true that Shelley has plenty of enemies, investigators have to wonder, did one of them take their revenge by killing her husband? They begin digging into Shelley's connections and are stunned to discover that the grieving widow has neglected to tell them something important.
My understanding was they began flirting at work and just developed a relationship that way.
The secret Shelley's keeping is a bombshell.
There's trouble in paradise, and that would be a very strong motive in any investigator's eye for potential murder.
Detectives working the Jimmy Michael murder have been told his wife Shelley has made a number of enemies around town. Now, they want to know why. When they interview one of Jimmy's friends, they get their answer.
Was there anything off in Jimmy's life?
He claims Jimmy and Shelley didn't have the blissful marriage that everyone thought.
Cutting it, Jimmy.
How come every time I go to touch you, you cringe?
Jimmy had begun to talk to him some about coldness that he had felt developing from Shelley.
Jimmy told his friend that Shelley had cut him off from sex, complaining she was too tired from working all the time. But Jimmy's friend says the truth is there's another reason why Shelley wasn't interested in having sex with Jimmy. It's because she's been getting plenty of sex from other men.
She was sleeping around. She was a notorious philanderer. She wasn't a good little Catholic girl. She was a bit of a floozy, somebody who was very shallow and would just move from the flavor of the month to the next flavor that popped into her life.
And it seems Shelley's secret was starting to get out. She's been gaining a reputation at work and throughout town for sleeping around.
There are some people out there who, had that perception of her of being a home wrecker. You love them, leave them, go to the next guy. Would definitely be the reputation.
Jimmy's friend says Jimmy wasn't in the dark about his wife's exploits either.
Just say it.
How many times
Just
have I
tell me
tell
the
you?
truth.
I'm not cheating on you.
Jimmy did have suspicions that she was seeing another man. He received a package with a note in it. The note said, "Keep your whore wife away from my husband."
At first, Jimmy thought the anonymous note was a mistake, until he saw what else was in the package. One of Shelley's sweaters. Whoever sent the package was clearly angry. Police wonder, angry enough to commit murder?
I imagine that if Shelley had stolen some other man's attention or something, that his spouse, girlfriend, whatever, would develop at least some animosity. It's not something people take kindly to.
She really was the town tramp, and everyone knew it. And I think we can assume that there were a lot of women in Morgantown who didn't like Shelley.
Could the jealous wife of one of Shelley's conquests have lashed out in revenge? But if that's the case, why was Jimmy the killer's target and not Shelley?
Was there a potentially infinite number of women out there who were sufficiently scorned to have done something like this? Absolutely. But didn't make a lot of sense, though, that Jimmy would have been the target, though, of that kind of anger.
Maybe Jimmy's ex-wife, Stephanie, isn't as over their divorce as she claims and has been secretly plotting her revenge on the husband who abandoned her.
One of the reasons that we kept the idea going that Stephanie should remain a viable suspect was because, by all accounts, her anger had not lessened with the passage of time.
Do you know what you did to me? You are a horrible human being.
Just accept the fact that we're through.
She was downright mad.
As far as I'm concerned, you can both burn in hell.
Very jilted, very angry. Very hurt and having a very difficult time getting over it.
Or police wonder, maybe it was Shelley who wanted Jimmy out of the way. She's traded in an old husband for a newer model once before. But perhaps this time she wanted a more permanent solution than divorce. Police decide it's time to bring Shelley in for questioning.
Have you yourself been involved in any extramarital affairs, Shelley?
Well, that's ridiculous.
But when they confront the cheerleader about the rumors of her infidelity, she's taken aback.
I would never cheat on Jimmy, ever.
She denies vehemently that she's having any affair at all with any other man. She claimed they had a great relationship, the two of them.
Shelley also reminds detectives that she couldn't have killed Jimmy. She was at the hospital all morning the day he died.
She went to work and then, had a normal day at the office, and received a call their house was on fire.
Nurses station, this is Shelly.
Her alibis were pretty solid.
But still, there's something about her denial of the affairs that doesn't ring true to police. From all detectives have heard, Shelley's love 'em and leave 'em ways are well known. So why is she refusing to own up to her affairs? Then it hits them. If she didn't murder Jimmy, maybe she's protecting a lover who did.
There is always the possibility that she lied about the affair to protect her paramour, the person she was having the affair with. Maybe he was involved in the crime.
In a situation where a spouse is murdered and the other spouse is having an affair, you obviously have to at least rule out the person they're involved with or look at them with a very critical eye.
If her latest fling was expecting more from Shelley than just wham bam, thank you ma'am, could he have taken drastic steps to ensure he'd have the feisty cheerleader all to himself?
There was a lot of speculation that her current lover was involved and that he had an opportunity and means to have committed the crime.
Convinced that she's protecting someone, detectives try to uncover exactly what Shelley's been doing between the sheets and with whom. And they soon learn that this sexy cheerleader hasn't yet revealed all her secrets. In fact, the person they find under her covers has a surprising story of his own to tell.
Lies are very difficult to manage because you start out by telling one lie to cover something up, and then you have to lie to explain that one. At the end of the day, they always catch up with you.
Police investigating Jimmy Michael's widow, Shelley, have discovered that she was cheating on her dead husband.
We came to know, in particular, that she had at least a short-term relationship or some type of a fling, and that was something that was going on just before the murder and the arson.
And when the identity of Shelley's current lover is revealed, detectives are shocked by how close to home she found her latest fling. Shelley's been sleeping with one of Jimmy's closest friends and part-time employee, a married man named Bobby.
Bobby was a young man, I think about Jimmy and Shelley's age. He drove a truck for Jimmy. And I'm sure that if Jimmy were alive, he would have said, Bobby's a friend of mine. Absolutely.
When Bobby was laid off from his previous job, Jimmy gladly invited his friend to come work for him.
I feel awful.
And when Bobby is brought in for questioning, he confesses that he got more out of the job than just a steady paycheck.
He told the truth and admitted to that relationship having occurred.
I knew it was wrong. I would never want to do that to Jimmy. If I could take it back, I would.
He and Shelley caught each other's eye, and a relationship soon evolved. From that point, the intimate parts of their affair took place in Shelley and Jimmy's marital bedroom. It was certainly a horrible act of betrayal on both of their parts.
Shelley's reportedly had a string of casual lovers during her marriage. But with a deceased husband now in the mix, investigators must wonder if her latest love affair is more serious than her usual escapades. But Bobby tells police his relationship with Shelley was trivial.
It was just sex. Nothing more.
His statements to the officers and his testimony was that this was a passing lustful affair that would have come and gone in a relatively brief period of time.
But police wonder, did Bobby take their tryst more seriously than he admits? He clearly wouldn't be the first to have become addicted to this cheerleader's charms. Maybe he saw this affair as a golden opportunity in more ways than one.
Bobby was definitely someone that could have had a very strong motive to get Jimmy out of the way. He was having an affair with his wife. He worked for Jimmy. There's the possibility that maybe he stood to gain in a financial way. So any of these things could have transpired.
But when police press Bobby, he insists their affair was just about sex. He has no intention of leaving his wife for Shelley and had no reason to kill his boss and friend.
I regret what I did with Shelly. I love Jimmy, and I didn't want to leave my wife to be with Shelly at all.
He's believable, but doesn't have much of an alibi.
The day of the incident, I know that Bobby had made a delivery somewhere to someone through the home medical business, and he actually did drive by Shelly and Jimmy's home.
There were just as many questions out there floating about what was his specific involvement, how involved was he? Was he in fact maybe the mastermind of it?
To convince investigators of his innocence, Bobby offers up an important piece of information. Shelley and Jimmy had another secret that police aren't aware of. He says that despite what they may have heard, sex wasn't the real problem in Shelley's marriage. It was money.
You need to make more money.
Shelley always harbored concerns about their level of income.
I don't know if I can live like this anymore, Jimmy. You're not giving me what I need or what I deserve. I deserve more than this.
She had aspirations of a certain lifestyle and income level, but it didn't seem to be happening fast enough.
Bobby says Shelley's fed up with being a nurse and working endless hours at the hospital.
She wanted to get out of the hospital, to not go in every day and not work the grind every day.
Bobby explains that Shelley wants to quit nursing so she can open her own uniform embroidering business. One that will get her back to the one true passion in her life: cheerleading. But there's a problem: money. Or more precisely, not enough of it. Jimmy's medical supply company wasn't bringing in enough cash to finance Shelley's dream.
Shelley was used to getting what she wanted, but as time wore on, one of the things she wanted was a different type of life, a type of life that required more money. And Jimmy couldn't overnight just be able to satisfy those needs.
The revelation gives investigators both a new reason to suspect Shelley in her husband's murder and an idea where to look next: the insurance company. And they make a shocking discovery.
Jimmy had $500,000 life insurance policy. I believe that they both took out that amount of life insurance on each other. So it was a fairly new insurance policy that had been signed within the year prior to the fire and to the murder.
Shelley could have gained the entirety of the life insurance policy. I would say that $500,000 would have helped her to live a very lavish lifestyle, at least for a short time. You would definitely have to consider the financial gain as part of the motive for what was done.
$500,000 would be more than enough to get Shelley's business off the ground. Detectives think they finally have their motive. But what they don't have is proof. If Shelley's a murderer, they still can't figure out how she did it.
It's not making any sense at all.
with Shelley Michael, having gone to the hospital to her regular shift and at her regular time, the question was, how in the world could she have actually killed him?
Has a philandering cheerleader outsmarted the police department's best detectives? Is this Black Widow hiding one final secret?
These types of things don't happen here. It's hard to come to grips with it.
Police believe Shelley Michael killed her husband Jimmy for the insurance money, but her alibi seems airtight. And the medical examiner still hasn't been able to identify how Jimmy was killed.
Something had happened to him to cause him to die before the fire, but all the post-mortem examinations showed that there was no indication of any bullet wound or a knife wound, so none of those things were present.
Police wonder, could Shelley have somehow poisoned her husband and then set the house on fire? As a nurse, she has access to all kinds of exotic drugs that wouldn't show up in a routine autopsy. But what should the medical examiner be testing for? What's this she-devil's secret weapon?
Initial toxicology indicated there was something there that was unidentified, some sort of source in the blood or tissue that was collected. The crime lab could not figure out what this foreign substance was.
Police begin to worry they'll never have the evidence they need to put this fiery femme fatale behind bars. But an anonymous phone call is about to change all that.
The anonymous caller makes a call to a law enforcement officer and says, you may want to see that any body fluids or tissue samples that are able to be retrieved are tested for any type of a surgical paralytic.
Sure enough, the medical examiner is able to confirm that the unknown substance in Jimmy's blood is a powerful muscle relaxant called rocuronium. Administered in a large dose, rocuronium can paralyze the lungs and without a breathing tube cause suffocation and a slow death, just as it did to Jimmy Michael.
Where it would be like being buried alive.
Basically suffocated to death. Just imagine not being able to move or breathe, but still being aware of what's going on, be able to see, be able to hear. You know, his senses would still be intact, but really unable to move or breathe. Horrific death, there's no doubt about it.
Rocuronium isn't commonly found in pharmacies, but it is stocked by most hospitals. Shelley Michael would have had easy access to the deadly drug.
Rocuronium was what was called at the hospital a floor drug, which meant that it was easily available to people who needed it there because they might need it quickly, and they had to have easy access to that.
But detectives still don't have a way to place Shelley at the scene of the crime. She was at the hospital all morning while Jimmy burned. Or so they thought.
After the police interviewed all the witnesses, her story started falling apart.
I know she mentioned to you and a couple of other people that she was, here the whole time. I actually saw her step out of the office.
Approximately how long was she gone?
About 30 minutes.
Police learned that while she did arrive for work at 6:30 a.m., she was seen leaving just after 8. Minutes later, a neighbor spotted her at home.
When we're talking about the timeline of the day of the fire, She originally denied ever leaving the hospital.
I was at the hospital that morning. Everyone there saw me. I was working the morning shift. You can ask anyone there.
One of the critical witnesses in the case is a neighbor who sees her at a certain point in time, which she had contended that she was at the hospital.
Police believe that when Shelley was seen returning home at 8 a.m., Jimmy had already been dead for a couple of hours. She most likely injected him earlier that morning before she left for work.
We believe that she awoke that morning and would have given Jimmy that injection. She could have done it quickly. She was a skilled nurse.
It would have taken Jimmy more than 10 agonizing minutes to die. Paralyzed, but completely conscious as he slowly suffocated on their bed. Unable to move, there was nothing he could do to save himself.
For any human being to have to die that way, to be aware the end was coming, to feel the effects of suffocation come in is just unfathomable.
Police believe that once Jimmy was dead, Shelley got busy trying to start the fire she hoped would cover her tracks, and then left for work.
She had to try to start the fire at 6 o'clock. So I believe that's when she turned the iron on high. She left for work thinking that the iron would eventually start the fire.
Roughly 2 hours later, Shelley must have discovered her plan had failed.
Around 8 o'clock or so, the fire department hasn't called the hospital. No one's telling her house is on fire. She has a dead husband back at the house. What is she going to do? She has to go back and start the fire again.
Shelley had no choice but to make a quick trip home to torch her dead hubby.
How long does it take to flick a bic? You can light a match, you can set a fire with a cigarette lighter, anything with an open flame. It wouldn't take very much to get a fire going.
Shelley succeeded, and only 17 minutes after she left, she was back at the hospital. It's a small window of time, but just enough to ruin Shelley's alibi and finally give police the evidence they need to make an arrest. Shelley Michael is charged with first-degree murder and first-degree arson. She's convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
She had the qualities and characteristics of a total sociopath. She just did not care how her behavior impacted other people. This is a level of coldness that you don't see in every murder.
Jimmy Michael thought he'd married his dream woman, someone who would always be on his team. But this cheerleader was only rooting for herself. And in the end, her greed and insatiable drive to be number one cost him his life.
I think justice was served. If you look at the facts, people who lie and conceive plans like this with evil intentions usually are uncovered.
Shelley's just a cold individual. There are just some people in the world who are capable of pure evil, and they are out there.